Good evening, folks. It's Diamond from the Oppenheimer Ranch Project, and we are coming to you live with Maverickstar Reloaded, poleshiftnews.com, in a series of interviews that we have been discussing the Mavstar Observatory, the placement of more magnetometers worldwide, so that a citizen scientist group of individuals can actually be ahead of the mainstream, ahead of the powers that be, and we control our destiny because we will have the data. Gene, you look awesome. How's the new job?
It's good. It's really good. I'm enjoying it. And we really need to get ahead of the mainstream. We have been lucky on a few occasions to come out before NOAA on their announcement of where the new magnetic pole is. We came out and warned people, as you know, 4 months in advance that there was some uptick in the magnetic pole movement. We told people 4 months before NOAA did. They didn't come out until the 9th of January, I think the first article that I read about it. And the idea is that we get these magnetometers out that we're building and get those out to Virginia, Los Angeles. That's going to track that intensity that's shrinking now over Canada. We're going to put some in the south border of Russia or north border of China, one of those two regions, but it will be east and west so that we can track again the intensity, which is now moving over that north side of the hemisphere, and again in west and east coast of Australia, so we can track what's going on the southern hemisphere of the Earth as well.
Now, for those of you that have been following Gene over at his YouTube channel, you recently posted a video on around 5 to 7 years left. I didn't have a chance to watch this, but are you insinuating that? What are you saying in the video, Gene?
Okay, so quite simply, based on data that NOAA has released, and we obviously detected, there is a very vast shrinkage of that high intensity region, or that pole, which is now currently over Canada, and it has rapidly reduced over 7 years. And I predict that if it continues in its current trend, it's going to dissipate completely. Well, the point is that as we know now that these two intense regions, where our compasses and our sensors point, is directly in between the two large intensities over the northern hemisphere, or in between those two poles, what will happen is when the Canadian one dissipates completely, we are going to see a rapid shift. And this could be an indication that we're going into those weak field lines. And just to give people an idea of what we're talking about with the weak field lines and the strong field lines of the magnetic region over the northern hemisphere, is that for the last 100 years, there has been a gradual shifting of the magnetic North Pole. So people would have saw a slight movement of their compass over the last 100 years. But over the last recent 40 years, we have seen it move more distance in shorter spaces of time. So when this dissipates, this high intensity region, which is now over Canada, one of the 4 magnetic poles that we have on this planet, when that dissipates, we're going to see a fast shift, and that could push the region into the strong field lines into the weak field lines. Now, magnetic poles don't like to hang about in weak field lines, and when that happens, we could see what we've witnessed over the last 30 years with regards to climate becoming more extreme and more chaotic. We could see that at that point in time rapidly get worse from then on. But the main thing is, and this is what I've been really concerned about and trying to get home to everybody, is this is a massive event. This magnetic anomaly that we're going through is also a rare event. And we have to put things in perspective. When we have seen planets in our own solar system lose their magnetic poles, lose their magnetosphere, we see that they lose their water on their surface. They also lose their upper atmosphere. And the classic example is Mars. In our solar system, we know at one point, studying the terraform on Mars, that there was vast rivers, river networks, probably even oceans on Mars. But as probes have passed over there recently, they've discovered that in the impact craters, there's magnetic anomalies, which indicate that it did have at some point a magnetic field, which probably at that point protected its liquid on its surface. Now, my point is this. This event used to be a regular event on planet Earth. We used to go through these magnetic reversals every 350,000 years or thereabouts on average. It has taken an extra 500,000 years this time, so something may have slowed down in our core, which has put us on a course for what probably has taken place with Mars. So we could end up, in the not too distant future, even looking like Mars. If we lose our magnetosphere, the upper atmosphere will become subject to sputtering. It will strip off the upper atmosphere. When the upper atmosphere is gone, we may even lose the water on the planet. And this is what we're trying to do. We know that mainstream organisations are withholding the information with regards to what is really taking place. There is only probably 1 to 3% of the world's population that actually knows at this present time it's going through a magnetic reversal. Runway numbers, which align themselves with headings according to compasses, have to be changed. They've been changing these runway numbers because they no longer line up on them headings according to the magnetic North Pole. So, there is no doubt about it. This anomaly is taking place. This anomaly is taking place, and in a very, very delayed approach, 500,000 years delayed, to be specific. And, what we want to do as a small observatory is just keep the public informed as to what's going on with regards to this big anomaly that's taking place on our Earth. It is the rarest event that is taking place on our Earth. And, there could be some real significant impacts to the biodiversity on a whole range on this planet as a result of that.
Yeah, so real quick, for those that are listening, not to confuse you, there are a couple of things happening right now. And Gene is referring to the polarity reversal of our planet. So a full polarity reversal of the planet is what many people are thinking about, and they call it a pole shift. And that is when the north goes to the South Pole and the South goes to the North Pole. It would be an actual flip of the magnet. And it is what happens on Earth or on the sun every solar cycle. So every 11 years on the sun, north goes to the South Pole and the South goes to the North Pole. And in another 11 years on the sun, it reverses back. So it takes 2 solar cycles to do a full polarity flip on the sun, where North Pole returns back to the north. A little different on Earth. It's much slower. And in the geologic history, our polarity flips occur about every 700,000 years. Which makes us overdue, because if you look here, the polarity reversal on this graph happened around 730. So that's the Brunus-Matayama polarity reversal. It brought us into what's called negative black, where the North Pole is where it is now. Prior to that, prior to 730 million years ago, the North Pole was at the southern pole. It was opposite polarity. So we're talking about different scales of events. You can see here in recent history, in the last 50,000 years, we have data that the poles go on excursions. So while they are locked in polarity for millions of years, the polarity being the position where north is up north, south is down south, at periodic intervals around 12,000 years, every 12,000 years, the polarity starts to wander. There is wandering of the poles. It does not switch the polarity of Earth, but the poles break down. And when they break down, there's chaotic events because the magnetosphere wanes, more cosmic rays enter, and we have more flooding, more cloud nucleation. And what you just covered, we have recently covered on the channel, and that's the loss of water. Because as the magnetosphere and the magnetosheath weakens, if we have a solar outburst, when our magnetosphere is weak, that's when that's sputtering. That's when we can rip off of the planet our water supply. So we're definitely talking about catastrophic events happening and unfolding in the near future. And I like your 5 to 7 year time frame for all compasses to make a quick flip to the right, because when that field in Canada weakens enough, all compasses will point to the pole over Siberia all of a sudden. And that's what you think is going to happen, correct?
Yeah, I did some experiments a while ago. I recreated them for some of the viewers on YouTube on my channel. And what it does is it shows that, the interactions between the weak and strong field lines, what we've just been discussing. And you can see how when it gets to around 40 degrees of movement, it no longer holds, a current position. It starts to wobble a lot. And then if you just go beyond that 40 degrees, you get a sudden reversal of the compass needle. It's something that anyone can do. And it is for that reason, I worked out how many miles away we was from reaching that 40 degree mark. We're probably about 200 to 300 miles off reaching that mark right now, that 40 degree mark, like we do in that little experiment I've done. So, with the magnetic pole, with the high intensity region over Canada right now weakening, it's going to push us straight into those weak field lines. If it behaves like it did in the experiment, then we're going to get the reversal at that point. But what happens when we go through that reversal is, the magnetosphere collapses almost, because there is no two poles. I mean, we could end up with, at that point, 4 poles over the magnet, or 8 poles. We could see them turning up in places that we would never have expected until there is a readjustment and they resituate themselves. I predict it's going to be another 100 years before they actually settle down back into their original, into their new positions. But it's what will happen during that point in time. What worries me is, again, there's a lot of facets to this magnetic anomaly, and they all relate to the fact that we're overdue this by, probably 500,000 years. And the other one is that if we start to go into this reversal and the magnetic poles collapse, and as we've already waited an extra 500,000 years, does that mean then we're going to wait probably a prolonged period of time for the poles to actually reverse? And if that is the case, we're going to be subjected to a hell of a lot of cosmic radiation at that point, because the magnetosphere will be down during that period of time before they reconnect. If this is going to follow suit in a slow reversal, like it's been delayed 500,000 years, it could also be a slow reversal or a slow transition through those weak field lines. And if that is the case, it could be devastating for the biodiversity as a result of the cosmic radiation that we'll experience at that time.
Yeah, well, we can guarantee, if you're listening to this podcast, that in your future, you're currently living in the cosmic ray modern maximum. The planet has never experienced cosmic ray flux like it is right now, because we happen to be in solar minimum when cosmic rays increase. So for the next year, we're going to have very high cosmic ray flux. It's predicted to increase for hundreds of years based on mainstream data, because we're going into a super grand minima. And to add insult to injury, the waning magnetosphere increases cosmic rays as well. Now, so you are guaranteed to have effects of cosmic rays in your future. Now, let's talk about some of the more esoteric effects here. There are many people, Gene, that think that as the magnetic field weakens, that the spin of the Earth, the rotation of the Earth will slow, and that when the magnetosphere or the magnetic field reaches almost zero and the polarity flips, if we are at a polarity reversal, one of the big ones, that the Earth will stop and begin to rotate in the opposite direction. Now, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Okay. So, just want to quickly cover one other thing that might be a problem during the, the transition of the poles, and that is if we was to get, as you said at the beginning of this podcast, a weak solar flare or some ejecta from a CME hit us. Our magnetic field that protects us from a lot of the solar radiation would be devastating to the infrastructure. We've all seen, I think, these documentaries that have been conducted, widely on YouTube. What happens when the grid goes down? The problem is that most countries aren't geared up to replace every transformer. They don't have replacements for every transformer. So, if we did get a slight glance, somewhat similar to what happened during the Carrington event, and you've got to remember the Carrington event, the height of technology was just telephone lines, and it set fire to most of those at that time. So can you imagine how vulnerable we are with all our technology? Are you okay? Yeah, how vulnerable we are with our technology during this day and age. Our satellites are protected by the magnetosphere because of some of them fly in the low orbit. Not a lot of them fly out of the protection of our Earth's magnetic field. So they are, to a lot of degree protected. If the magnetosphere weakens, it's going to leave even our satellites subject to, the radiation, which could fry the circuitry on their onboard systems. If that's the case, we could lose GPS. And if that's the case, we've not only lost GPS, we've lost magnetic way of navigation because we can't rely on where the poles will be. And, getting back to the question you asked with regards to the rotational axis, well, we have seen one of the three anomalies that is over the northern and southern hemisphere move, which is the magnetic poles. We are also seeing these cold weathers and Arctic climates move over Siberia and further into China and even into those South China islands where these farmers are experiencing supermassive crop losses, and thousands of heads of cattle are dying because of these temperatures have never been experienced in these regions. So you could say that we have seen the second anomaly, which is naturally over these regions where the magnetic poles are. The only other one that is there is the rotational axis. Now, we used to, on my channel, every summer and winter equinox, go out and measure the altitude and the position of where the sun is. So to my knowledge, we haven't experienced a rotational axis. And, a lot of these ancient monuments like Stonehenge was built for that purpose, for monitoring the equinoxes at these times of the years, like the winter solstice and the summer solstice. So to my knowledge, we haven't seen a rotational axis, but that doesn't mean that during a magnetic reversal, it's not off the cards, because it's one of these anomalies which I think, if in the future we do classify as major planetary mechanics, I think one thing that's going to be the most important is going to be the magnetic poles of the planet. Secondly, the Arctic climates around the poles, and thirdly, the rotational axis. So to put it in very short terms, yes, it is a possibility that after we've seen the magnetic poles go into the weak field lines and shift very quickly, it doesn't outrule the fact that that other anomaly that is in that region could move, although it remains to be seen. I would just say that these three are not there all together in the same region by just coincidence. I think they all play a part in each other. And I think if we start to see one move, we're going to start to see the other one move. And the other thing is that we have no recorded evidence of what actually takes place during a completed reversal. We have, there are shorter intervals in our history where the Earth has attempted to go for a reversal but hasn't. I don't think we're going to be lucky enough to experience one of these this time round because of the large delay. So I think we're expecting a little bit more than the average magnetic pole reversal. And I think for the fact that we've waited another 500,000 years this time round means that, for every reason, this pole reversal can't be compared by any other pole reversal that we've had because of that delay.
Now, we're going to witness these effects before our very lives. And right now we're experiencing a moderate geomagnetic storm. It began about 12 hours ago, Gene. This is when we coupled with the southern coronal hole. And this is a typical coronal hole coupling here. You can see plasma density increase here. like snow on a shovel blade. And then right after that, plasma speed increases. So first you have the density spike, you have the shift and the phi angle, and then you go up in speed. Once you get above 420, you could get into geomagnetic storm. Here we're almost at 600 kilometers per second, and the temperature is still rising. So this event is not over. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because small events that bring us into G1 geomagnetic storm are now starting to affect the grid. They typically affect the grid when the shift here on the magnetometer is more than 150 nanotesla. So you can see here the shift is only around 100, which is more moderate. So there's probably less effects. But as the magnetosphere weakens, these minor perturbations, like you said, we're down here at the SEA, ESRT hazard quotients. This is the satellite loading numbers here. And when you get the red
Yeah.
zone, you have surface charging of satellites. The second graph here is internal charging of the satellites. So we'll actually be able to watch in real time events that cause satellites to fall out of the sky or fry up there, because this is going to unfold in the next few years. And we have these charts here that will allow us to monitor what's actually going on. There's also the real-time orbit display over at spaceweathernews.com, where you can see that satellites in this outer region are now being charged. So in the future, if we're in a geomagnetic storm and you come over and look at these graphs and you see red in both shells, that means your internet's about to fry. And another good point you bring up, Gene, is the transformer issue. If we have a major event, the time it takes to build these, most of them are custom. They take months, if not years, to produce. The downtime will be epic. Literally, cities that could be turned off for years, and it would literally go back to the Stone Age for a bit.
Yeah. And we've seen the documentaries of what happens after just 1 week of losing the grid. Nobody has electricity, which is only one problem. The fact is that people panic, they clear out the shops. But it also creates other problems, like fuel stations can't pump the fuel. So it starts to affect the logistics of countries. And that means more food can't get into shops for longer periods of time. It just has a category effect all the way along. I mean, if you're a farmer and you can't get fuel for your tractor, you're not going to get the crops in. And in turn, them crops aren't going to get to the shops. And in turn, them shops aren't going to be able to sell it to the people, which means, cities are going to become toxic little places very quickly, where no sewerage is being pumped out, no electricity is going in, no food's going in. All those artificial things that cities thrive on won't get. And of course, people's attitudes change very quickly, only in a matter of a week. And that documentary called Grid Down is a perfect example of what happens. It was interesting that there was an American version of Grid Down and a British version. And it was almost like, they was trying to tell people to prepare for these things, but, in a very, very low-key way. These are all possibilities that are likely to happen. And, of course, related to the magnetic pole reversal.
Yeah, indeed. Now, do you know that we started a new channel? You said you went over there and looked at it. You gave us the seal of approval, Gene?
Oh, you don't need my seal of approval. Anyone that does anything on this subject and gets this word out to more people, as already my seal approval, but there is no seal approval needed. I'm glad for you. I think you do a really good job. I've seen some of your articles and videos that you've done recently. I think you've covered it very well. What can I say? Well done to you.
Yeah, and well done to you for this citizen scientist funded initiative, the Mavstar Observatory. And guys, if you want to get involved and follow us, we're going to have this video up on Magnetic Reversal News, the interview. And there's links over here. Mavstar Reloaded is the #1 channel that's featured here, as well as our Oppenheimer Ranch Project. So it's easy to subscribe to both. And you can learn about some basic things about what happens, Earth's magnetism, and other primer courses. If you don't know what we're talking about, it's important to be informed. And what you just heard come out of Gene's mouth and what we say on the channel is these events are going to start now. And the number one effect is the potential for grid down. And then lack of food and sanitary conditions. So the two most important things you can start to do to prepare for the events that will unfold is to get a water filter, like a big Berkey water filter where you can literally take pond water, run it through, and drink it safely. They cost about $300. We sell them at in our My Patriot Supply store. So being able to access clean water, number one. The second thing is having food, because like Gene said, if you're in a city that goes dark for a year, there will be no more shipments, no more supplies. So you need to be growing your own food or have a year's worth of dry goods stockpiled just to hedge your bets. So these are the two most important things: to have some extra food and a way to get clean water. Do you have any other quick tips, Gene?
Yeah. People ask me what could possibly be done by them in a situation such as we've talked about. And the first thing is, we are at the door already, guys, and you should have already had some form of insurance, insurance put up for your family. And like you say, that could come in many forms. Another thing, other than water and food, perhaps a bit of storage of both, would be some equipment, tools. And, if you can just spare a bit of your time to have a look at some of the wars recently and how people have coped in some of the most worst conditions during those wars, that will give you a good idea of how they survived. Because although people won't be, I hope that people don't turn against each other, but from what we saw in Grid Down, they did very quickly within about 2 weeks. So, you might have a means to protect yourself. But more importantly, I think learning how to survive in these situations. I remember somebody talking about on YouTube something that, is one of these documentaries, and all I could do all the way through is just nod in agreement, because I just thought it was one idea after the next, which was great. Like, during these times, having a facility to distillate alcohol, because alcohol can be used, as an anesthetic. It can sterilize things. These things aren't that easy to build. You can build them out of copper piping, but it can be used in a number of different ways. If you've got a wound that you need to clean and you've got no more, mainstream ointments and things like that that will sterilize that cut, alcohol can do it. We've got to think along the lines of probably the Edwardian and the Victorian methods. That will see you through. Another one is, having the ability to have something during those times that you can trade with other people. And in this documentary I watched, the guy had modified a big butane can, and he'd made an adapter where he could refill simple things like lighters, because people quickly ran out of a simple method like a lighter to relight their fires. If you haven't got a lighter that you can strike, or an iron zinc striker, you're going to have to try and rub a bit of wood together to get a fire going. And that, I've practiced it myself. It's not an easy thing to do. And, you need to brush up on these skills. Lighting a fire could be, mean that you can either save your family in an hour, or they can perish in that hour in sub-zero temperatures. And learning. I have taken it upon myself to learn some of the very old skills, like, catching fish and things like that, but making your own rods with pretty much nothing and your hooks with nothing. Like I say, these are probably the insurance policies that you only need to buy once for your family. And we're at the door where, these events are going to start getting worse. We've seen in the United States sub-zero temperatures, record breaking after record breaking, day after day. And, the proof is there. The climate is changing. This world is going through a magnetic reversal. And, people need to take out these little insurance policies, whether it be a bug-out bag, some bug-out survival kit, or just something that they can be independent on and not have to rely on anybody else. Because we've seen what happened during Katrina, and that was just a flood. And it's still, some parts of that place are devastated today. The government never came to help them until it was pretty much everything had changed. And, like I say, still to this day, Katrina isn't put back on the map like it was back in its day. And that is just a clear example of, if you heavily rely on a government, what is going to happen is you're going to be waiting a very long time. I suggest to you guys is that, perhaps a couple of $100 here can get you some of the most essential equipment that you'll need. And, you can be independent and look after yourself and your loved ones, because they're the ones that matter at the end of the day more than anything.
Wise words from a wise man. Gene Beard's Maverickstar Reloaded. No wiser words have been said on this show. They're not coming to help you. You're going to be waiting a long time. So start preparing now. One step at a time, one thing at a time, one day at a time. If you're not preparing in baby steps, then you're not going to be prepared, period. If you want to support the channel, come over to Pole Shift News on Patreon here. Maverickstar Reloaded is creating videos, and he's also creating magnetometers. If you want to know more about the Mavstar Observatory and the magnetometers we're going to be placing around the globe, come check out his videos. You can become a Patreon, subscribe to his YouTube channel, check out our new channel, Magnetic Reversal News, where the only place you can get these interviews, exclusive Maverickstar Reloaded interviews with the Oppenheimer Ranch Project. It's been a pleasure to have you on, Gene. Oh, there's my mug. I am delayed. You have any parting words?
It's always a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. And, thank you for having me on.
We love you, Gene. Keep up the good work, and we'll be in touch soon. Be safe.